We are coming to you from the late-breaking future. McLaren, double disqualification at the Las Vegas GP. We do have a full episode coming up for you, but most of that was recorded before that news was announced. But Lando Norris, who initially finished second place in this Grand Prix, out, disqualified. Oscar Piastri, initially fourth, out, disqualified. And here we are with a double Mercedes podium and Max Verstappen, a very happy boy.
Yeah, I cannot believe it. Verstappen is on equal points with Piastri, only 24 points back from championship leading Norris. With 2 races to go and a sprint, the championship is actually back on. He can win this championship now.
Sure. I mean, it looked like we were in a position where Verstappen was going to need a lot of luck. And instead, he'll still need a bit of help to get there. No doubt about that. But he is in a much stronger position than he was a few hours ago. If you are catching up with the news, the issue, as it always is, Sam, it's the plank.
It's always the plank.
It's the plank. The same thing that Ferrari came across earlier this season. Not the first time we've seen this, but the minimum thickness of 9 millimeters specified under the technical regulations was exceeded from both cars. So it was measured, then remeasured by the FIA. McLaren did argue that mitigating circumstances existed in that there was additional and unexpected porpoising at the event. They also cited the weather on day one and not getting enough practice time in. But the FIA argued back to say that there was no provision in the regulations to give anything but a double disqualification in this instance. So essentially what's happened to Piastri has also happened to Lando Norris. We know they struggled here last year, Sam, and we also know they would have been thinking, how can we possibly resolve this for 2025? They should have thought of how to resolve it legally first, is what I'm going with.
Look, if you're trying to make the car more competitive at a track that you struggled at, which they have famously struggled at Vegas before, barely having a top 5 between them over the last 2 years, the best way to do it isn't to copy the notes of a team that broke the rules trying to improve their car earlier on in the year. Don't do that. Illegal. Still illegal. And of course, when it comes to McLaren, all things have to be fair. So it means that when one car got investigated, sure, the other one had to be investigated, right, Ben?
Yeah. Papaya rules, if you go into the bylaws of that, they did have to. Massive blunder from McLaren here, though. I know the Constructors' Championship is all sewn up, so they're not fighting for anything in that regard. But a real blunder, given the circumstances, that it's affected both drivers. I was having a look back at some of the previous disqualifications for this very reason. I already cited the one earlier this year that was Lewis Hamilton in China. We also had a race that we were there for back in Austin, was the last time in 2023 when Hamilton again was disqualified for it when he was at Mercedes, and then Leclerc was disqualified for it in the same Grand Prix at Ferrari. And I was thinking, what connects all these weekends? Well, those two, the Chinese GP and the US GP, both sprint weekends. So you've got limited practice time to uncover these sorts of issues. Here we had more practice time, but as McLaren suggested, not any time dedicated to long runs because of the weather on Friday. I'm not saying McLaren were that they should have been let off for this, but it's interesting the reasoning they've gone down. It does seem like the more, the limited practice time that you get can mean these issues aren't as easily solved.
No, and they've had some problems previously at this track. We've discussed this, and I think they thought they'd overcome those problems. They didn't have to deal with the tyre wear problem that a lot of other teams are going through. Temperature isn't affecting them. So when you've managed to actually come through that problem, you think, hang on, we're not winning the race here. Verstappen, of course, we find out is rather dominant, and we think there was maybe a fuel problem at the end of the Grand Prix that means Norris has to back off. Okay, they pick up a second and a fourth. And when you're the Constructors' Champion, when Lando Norris, the championship leader, is able to extend realistically his lead here, you think, okay, fine, we'll take that. But it all comes crashing down around them. And it means that actually Verstappen, George Russell, and Kimi Antonelli, of course, who starts P16, ends up on the podium here. They're going to be very, very happy. Mercedes walk away with a big haul of points, which they need going up against Red Bull and Ferrari, of course, for P2 in the championship.
Yeah, obviously this hurts both McLaren drivers, stating the obvious, but it hurts Lando Norris a little bit more, having lost 18 points for what would have been second place. Oscar Piastri, not quite as hurt for what would have been fourth place, but so Piastri maybe okay with this. He's closer to Norris now, weirdly, than he was at the beginning of this weekend, but now level with Max Verstappen. It puts him in a very difficult position, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I'm sure you've all been on social media and you might have seen this shot which came out while this discussion was going on, while they were being investigated. There's a shot of Oscar Piastri leaving the McLaren team pen with Mark Webber behind him, and they've both got the biggest grin on their face. And you kind of think, this is a bit weird. You're being investigated for disqualification. And I think the rumor is going around that they've realized that due to this result taking place, they've actually been benefited. They are now closer to Lando Norris than they were if the result was to stand. So this benefits both Verstappen massively and actually, weirdly, Oscar Piastri. Norris is the biggest loser of the three on the track, of course. We wouldn't say that socially. And it means that actually we come down to a 24-point gap between three cars with a sprint and 2 races to go. It does still sit in Norris's court. It can still be won easily by him, but it closes things right up.
I guess the big question coming out of this race, we've got 2 races to go now, one of which is a sprint weekend, so more points available. After Brazil, we might have been writing off Max Verstappen. He was still mathematically in the fight, but he needed a lot of things to go his way. This is one of those things. So now looking at that 24-point advantage that Lando Norris has over Verstappen, can Verstappen be world champion for a 5th year in a row?
I think we're about to unlock monster Max. I think when Max has got the bit between his teeth, when he's got an objective to fight for, he is scary. He is scary fast, arguably the best driver in the world right now. And I think McLaren, a little bit shaky, a little bit nervy. You know, Lando Norris, he's a little comfy, but when you've got Max Verstappen coming for you at a racetrack that, you know, he did pretty well at previously, and it's a sprint race, he's got more sprint wins than anyone else. He's not the kind of guy you want to go up against when you know that he's got a title on his hands. So, yeah, I think this could be all in Max Verstappen's court if he can deliver the goods.
Yeah, Lando Norris is the one guy that doesn't need reminding how this race went last year. He was asked in the media pen after the Grand Prix, do you feel better about Qatar than you do about Vegas? Going into this weekend, we were obviously unsure about how McLaren were going to perform. And he just straight out said, do you remember who won Qatar last year? And that man was Max Verstappen. So we are going to a track where 12 months ago, it was Verstappen who took victory. Abu Dhabi, Verstappen has won there a few times, all of which in non-controversial circumstances. So you've got 2 races there. There's plenty of points still to play for. And this DNF sort of gap that Norris had before, where he could afford one big error or one big mechanical DNF, that's gone now. He is very much in the crosshairs of Verstappen. We've got a very tasty 2 weeks on our hands.
Just want to jump in on the advantage here that I think Max also has on his hands, because while McLaren are still technically going up against each other, Max has 3 allies on the racetrack, right? He has, whilst Yuki Tsunoda is regularly not involved, he's on the racetrack. He could play a problem if something goes on there. You've also got RB. And maybe we rename RB as Racing Ballistics. You send them in, turn 1, no braking. It's just causing absolute chaos for everyone around. And Max hopefully picks his way through. But surely, you know, sitting us aside, you've got to use that second team advantage. We've seen them do it before, the likes of Gasly getting out the way when he was in AlphaTauri previously. Is there a way that they can feed that second team in and actually get Max ahead somehow?
Racing Ballistics might be the last thing that they have been called. They've been called everything else under the sun, so they might as well take that turn as well.
They love a new name.
They do love a new name. Do you know what I love?
What's that, mate?
Harry Eid. He's going to be here after the break because we have had to record this a little bit later in the day. Harry Eid will be here, and our full review of the rest of the Las Vegas GP will be here as well. Thanks so much for bearing with us today, folks. It's been a fun one. Thank you very much to the FIA for making your decision so promptly.
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear that we make maybe a few slight errors now in the main show due to how these results have changed. I go off on a little bit of a point that Haas have let themselves down. They ended up being double point scorers. Look, you could go into the past and laugh at us. So we're going to take that short break and we will head to the past now.
Ooh. Las Vegas Grand Prix review time, a race. One not from pole position for the first time since 1986. Max Verstappen taking victory ahead of Lando Norris in second and George Russell in third. Just to check, because not everyone can detect sarcasm. There has been a race not won from pole since that year. It's fine. I don't know about you, but that post-race has absolutely exhausted me more than the 90 minutes of F1 did.
Well, fortunately for all those who are big fans of the post-race, there will be a separate review show, which will be as long as the actual race review show, because of course that was as long as the actual race.
But it's just Harry.
It's just Harry, because he famously loves Vegas post-race. Harry, isn't that true? Aren't you the biggest fan of post-race Vegas?
I love post-race Vegas. My favorite part of the entire season. Mickey Mouse and a stupid fountain going up in the background. Anyway, it was, apart from that, it was an enjoyable enough race. I'm so happy to be it.
I'm really glad to hear that, mate. Well, we've got plenty coming up. Moment of the race, everything that happened in the midfield. Kimi Antonelli going all the way to 5th place, even with a 5-second penalty after being knocked out in Q1 yesterday. Oscar Piastri losing further ground in the championship to both of his rivals. And let's start with both of those rivals. Max Verstappen starting second in this race. We speculated, Sam, that he might try something up the inside of turn 1 on that first lap. And indeed, he got a pretty good start. Lando Norris was very aware of it, moved across on Max Verstappen as soon as he could, but goes deep into that first corner, not only loses a position to Max Verstappen, but also loses a position to George Russell. Let's start with Verstappen and his outright performance, because as soon as he got the lead, he wasn't all that challenged apart from very early on from Russell.
No, his overall race pace was really impressive, and I think better than his qualifying pace, which I think is the right way to set your car up. If you're going to be Max Verstappen, you want to score your points on a Sunday. Famously, that's how it goes in Formula One. I was really impressed with the way he managed this Grand Prix. It felt like at any point he could kick on and just drive off down the road if he wanted to. But we saw with Norris at the end that fuel became an issue. We saw that whilst the tyres weren't dying off, there was definitely a lack of pace, especially on the medium. And I think he balanced his Grand Prix really, really well. Had the early threat from George Russell, who of course came under some steering issues. And then Norris eventually also tries to apply the pressure. And it never really seems to materialize. The gap never seems to properly come down to the point where you think, this could change hands. And actually the mistake made at the start is about to be rectified and Norris can come back through. Max did what Max does. He just managed brilliantly. And then when the issues started to appear for the other drivers behind him, he just kicked on. And the way he was delivering purple sectors on that final lap shows you just how much pace that man was keeping in hand. I thought it was a really impressive Grand Prix from Max.
Harry, we've spoken about how Verstappen, with his position in the championship, just needs to do on every weekend what he can do with the car that's available to him. And he kind of referenced this in his post-race interview, that's what the car had available to it today. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, exactly that. I think Verstappen extracted the maximum from the Red Bull this weekend. And it was all a done deal at turn 1. I think he sort of forced Norris into that era. Obviously, he was always going to go for it at the start. I think that was inevitable. Whether he had a gap or not, he didn't have a gap because Norris closed it off so quickly. But obviously, then a result of that was that Norris went wide into turn 1, and from there, Verstappen didn't really look back. I think the telling sign for Verstappen's pace was when they came over the radio to Norris and said, go and get Verstappen. And then GP told Verstappen this, and Verstappen was like, nah, son, not today. Which was kind of like 2023 vibe Red Bull Verstappen. So you knew that he had it in hand, under control. So yeah, very, very impressive. But yeah, there's not much more he can do. Obviously, Norris finished second. He'd want him further back, or ideally out of the points. But as you said, from Verstappen's point of view, not a lot more he could do. Fastest lap, race win. A good afternoon in Vegas for afternoon, night. I don't know whatever time it was there.
It's the time. I don't know.
It's always night time in Vegas, isn't it? Sun ever rise?
Yeah, constantly dark there. So good time in Vegas for Verstappen.
Yeah, he was superb from the off, and it's not even though we were talking about the opportunity he might have into turn 1 at this race, it is not a very long run down to turn 1, so it required a good start from him to even threaten something into turn 1, and obviously it was enough to put Norris off his game. But even from there, yeah, he just seemed to have this completely in hand. I was going to make the same point about how as soon as Lando Norris was clear of George Russell and could theoretically make a charge towards Verstappen if he had the pace, that's when Verstappen decided, okay, whatever he's doing per lap, I'm just going to do the same thing. Because that gap kind of stabilized very quickly at that 5.5 seconds or so. But yeah, he was superb. And I always think the truest sign that someone is maybe got a little bit more in the locker than what they showed is when they go purple on the final lap of the race on what should, in theory, be very used tyres that are well past their best. And maybe that's a separate conversation. But yeah, Max Verstappen, he always had this in hand. And we don't know whether it'll be enough as we get to Qatar and to Abu Dhabi, but he can say, at least on this Grand Prix very specifically, he's done everything he could possibly do. What about that first lap, Sam? So Lando Norris defending from Verstappen from the off, goes deep. We know that on 50% of the times where Lando Norris has started from pole, he's ultimately not held that. What did you make of that moment?
Yeah, 16 poles, 8 victories for Lando Norris. It's not the best hit rate when it comes to converting into a win. He did have a bit of a reputation before this season of bottling it off the start. And he rectified that for the most part. But here today, and this season especially, leading from the start when there's 7 pole to win in a row, we're matching a record there 8 times. We're broken it, of course, today. It feels very silly that you do something so aggressive off the line, because actually I think the preferred line through turn 1 is to go around the outside anyway. It turns into the inside, really hard to stick it around the outside of turn 2. Whilst Jenson Button was heaping praise upon being so aggressive off the line, so we like a bit of aggression, we like a bit of will to will. I do think he over-egged it, and I think he basically looked at Max Verstappen's notes from a couple of years ago, and Max went, yeah, you can copy it, but you got to change it a bit. And Lando Norris did change it a bit by going off the track into turn 1. And I just think when it's such a long race, when we know with hindsight that this Vegas Grand Prix is actually a little bit harder to get overtakes done with and to follow through, even with the massive 1.3 miles straight, being in front pays off. Being in front pays dividends. And he threw that away in the first 10 seconds of the Grand Prix by screwing up his braking zone into a very short turn 1. So yeah, I think it's cost him. I think it's cost him the win. I do think that if he held the lead on lap 1, there's every chance he holds off the pace from Max behind, maybe causes him to overuse his tyres, maybe changes the strategy that's being applied. You know, the whole race might unravel a little bit differently. And because he had to play catch up, it meant he gets stuck behind Russell for a while. Verstappen gets away. He burns too much fuel. It all goes backwards from there. So he's lucky he's in a really fortunate place in the championship. But I think it's all on him. I think it cost him.
What did you make of Lando Norris and Verstappen into turn 1, Harry?
Yeah, I like I said earlier on, I think Verstappen forced him into that. I think I think I've seen this on Twitter or X. Dave Coulthard in the F1 TV com saying that Lando Norris tried to sort of play Verstappen at his own game there, but forgot who made the rules of that game, and it's Max Verstappen. Like you said, Sam, we'd sit here and criticize him if he had not defended it at the start. But it was clear that McLaren had pace today and potentially had the pace to win the race. Obviously, Verstappen had a lot in hand, I think, all day. But the mistake into turn 1 obviously cost him not only the lead, but then he got bumped down to P3 with Russell getting in front of him too. And I think that harmed his harmed his race more than just losing the lead would have done. So look, for Norris, it doesn't, in terms of the championship, doesn't matter that much. For today's race only, obviously was not ideal, and yeah, I think he could have got on to win it had he not made that error. But overall, it's not a disaster. He still finished P2. It's still a net gain on his teammate. So, yeah, I think he's not gonna lose much sleep over this one.
No, I don't think so. And I think the evidence of that was, again, post-race, he seemed pretty relaxed to the point where he's just dropping F-bombs. He don't care. He don't care. It's turn 1. I thought that I was quite happy with the intent from Lando Norris, because it's not something we've seen a great deal from him, is him getting his elbows out, particularly when it relates to Max Verstappen. And it was a real aggressive move over to the left-hand side, almost very Schumacher and Hakkinen-esque, I always think. Like, that's whenever I see an aggressive move like off the start, those are the two I immediately think of when they were jousting. The problem was the execution, not the intent. He goes way too deep into that first corner, and it's a good job he was so quick in qualifying, because he wasn't the only person to miss their breaking point going into turn one. The others have pretty much all come away worse because they found a car directly in front of them, and I'm sure we'll get onto a couple of those moments a bit later on. But of course, with Lando Norris getting pole position, he had a bit more road to run with. Like, he could go a little bit wide, and even if he did drop a position, he wasn't going to drop the car into another car. I think maybe I don't want to say we were cost an opportunity, because that's maybe not the right way to phrase it. But if Lando Norris at least keeps P2 off that start and Russell stays behind, it would have been, I think, a very interesting race between Norris and Verstappen. I feel like whoever led out of the first couple of corners probably had the advantage, in which case Verstappen still takes the win. But having to navigate George Russell in that first stint, I think, cost Lando Norris an opportunity to fight for this win. But hey, the position he is in the championship doesn't cost him all that much.
Big pet peeve about these street circuits is, if that's so many other races, if that's Melbourne, just straight off into a gravel trap or a grass trap. And, there's massive consequences for throwing that race away. I bet Oscar Piastri's eyes lit up when he saw just in front of him one McLaren going wide, veering over to the inside, George Russell coming through. And if that was many other tracks, that could be day over for a McLaren. I miss consequences for running wide.
Yes, we need to bring that back. Come on, Vegas. Just put some random grass in there.
Just put some poker chips all over the floor over there.
They'll do that.
Hey, what, Verstappen in Vegas?
No. God, it's way too early for that. Let's complete the podium with George Russell. Of course, not able to replicate what he did here last year and take victory, but still another podium for his record this year. Tried, I think, Harry, to stay with Verstappen as much as he could in both stints, potentially to his detriment, having to manage those tyres quite a lot in the final stint in particular, with Kimi Antonelli on much older tyres able to catch up to him quite rapidly. Is he going to be slightly disappointed he couldn't be more in the mix here?
I think he will be. He wanted, as they all do, he wanted to go for the win. But I think he got everything out of that Mercedes today. And I know, obviously, as you said, Antonelli was closing in quite rapidly in that final stint, but that's only because Russell was really having to push hard just to try and stay in the mix with Norris and Verstappen. Mercedes, whilst it had good pace, it just didn't have quite as good pace as the McLaren and the Red Bull, or at least as good pace as Verstappen and Norris. So, yeah, I think he'll be disappointed to not have been able to challenge a bit more, but I'm not sure he can be disappointed in himself in terms of, I think he gave everything, he left everything out there, and got the most out of that car. So yeah, it was a solid race for Russell. Not quite able to emulate what he did here last year, but haven't been able to emulate a lot of things, Mercedes. So I don't think he'd be too mad with it.
Sam, what do you think? How does he reflect on this race?
I think he would have been very happy had Lando Norris not had the fuel issue at the end of the Grand Prix. You look at that McLaren, it's way faster. We know that McLaren outpaces a Mercedes at the moment. And you look at Max Verstappen. It's Max Verstappen. And when the Red Bull is switched on and firing on all cylinders, the man is basically uncatchable, hence the dominant win we ended up with today. But I do think if the race just ran smoothly and he finished 7, 8, 9 seconds behind Lando Norris, you'd think, okay, I've got myself a podium. I started in third. I beat, the likes of those around me. I managed to stay clear of my teammate, despite him having probably a better strategy in the end of it. Solid. I'll pick up another podium. But because of the fuel issue, I know what George Russell's like. We've got to know him now over the years it's been in F1. He'll look at that and go, if I didn't have that steering problem, or if I just held on for a couple of laps longer to keep him behind me, that 3.5 second gap that the race ends off at, I could have got him again, because he wouldn't have been able to defend going into the heavy braking zones where he was on Lyco to save fuel. I think Russell would have wanted a chance to attack him. So I don't think he'll beat himself up over it. But I think there'll be a little part of him that goes, P2 was on the cards today, I'll probably just let that go. But he did well to be opportunistic, dealt with the turn 1 incident really well to get in front of Lando Norris. I thought held it around the outside. He ran a really good race, and I don't think there's too much more that could be asked of him.
They should definitely ask Charles Leclerc about Lando Norris's lift and coast for those last couple of laps. That was crazy, right, Charles? It's like, well, I do that every lap.
That's how you always drive Formula One car.
You're telling me people don't drive this way normally? Like, okay. I think George Russell will be... I think he'll be a tad disappointed just based on where he is in the championship, in that he's not really fighting for anything. He's clear of the Ferraris. He's clear of his teammate. He's not going to compete with the top 3 now. So I think he's just looking at every one of these last few races with the same sort of view of, can I just go out and try and get a win? Add to the couple that he's already got this year. He'd have absolutely circled this one on the calendar earlier on in the season to say, this might be one where I can contend. I think it's something that we thought that Mercedes would be a bit stronger here than where they normally are. And it was fine. And I can understand why they attacked Verstappen the way that they did early in those stints, just to see if they could get something. And as soon as that was apparent, he drops back. I think that does cost him a bit later on in this race. But I don't blame Mercedes for going for this. I don't blame Russell for the position he's in going for this, but still a solid result nonetheless. Kimi Antonelli's race. Finished P4 on track, ultimately demoted to P5 as a result of that 5-second penalty he got for the false start that you...
Sorry. Is it in the nation of America? Has anyone seen the false start in the state of Nevada? Because suddenly I know American geography, by the way, if you listen to the qualifying report. No idea where that is. Did you see him move? Did you see him move?
You need to be in slow motion for that, I think, because...
Great.
I didn't see anything more. Anyway, yes, he's finished P4 on track, P5 overall. Of course, started all the way down in the bottom 5 as a result of that Q1 knockout. Harry, should he be pretty content with the way he recovered it?
Yeah, I think so. Just on that point, by the way, I like the F1 TV direction, which we've spoken about already. Decided that they would show the racer for the penalty and made it no clearer. No clearer at all why there was a penalty.
I have learned nothing.
Just don't bother. I think Antonelli was super impressive today, but whether he had a jump start or not, especially in that final, I say final stint, he did the whole race, didn't he? Basically, it wasn't a final stint on the hard tires. So yeah, I think he'd be super content, and to be that close to Russell again. I know Russell was falling back because he'd been pushing hard to try and stay in the lead battle, but even so, to be that close to Russell towards the end of the race, I think was really impressive. And to hold off Piastri and Leclerc, who, certainly Piastri, I think, had more pace. There was one opportunity where Piastri looked like he was going to get the move done, and Antonelli held him off into that last chicane, and then that was it. The sort of challenge faded from there from the McLaren. So I was very impressed by Antonelli today. I think just this final third of the season from him he's sort of really come on strong. Obviously the qualifying wasn't great, and it would have been interesting to see where he would have ended up had he actually been in the top 10 to start with. But purely based on today, it was really impressive.
What did you make of Antonelli's race, Sam?
I thought this was superb. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. Now, it wasn't quite the win that I had predicted, so come on, Kimmy, you have let me down a little bit there, son. But after what was a really tricky qualifying, the way he's come back through the field, the way he's managed those ties is another conversation we need to have, by the way, because that is a big issue right now. But the way he's managed that pace, the way he's defending from Piastri, and that one time you spoke of, Harry, was true. The way that in the chicane, it looked like Piastri might get a run on him, positioning his car so perfectly, which meant it threw off the momentum that Piastri had exiting the corner. Couldn't get the move done. Actually, it put Piastri in a more vulnerable place against Leclerc at that point. So I thought defended brilliantly. And then even with that 5-second penalty, which I don't think is fair, extended the gap to Leclerc at the end of the Grand Prix, which meant that he only falls back one place behind Oscar Piastri. The damage limitation is absolutely fantastic. I think 2 or 3 more laps, there's a chance he's fighting with Russell and with an ailing Lando Norris. I really think he was that much quicker on that better strategy. The hard tyre was the best tyre by far to be on. He made it work. What he got through the field was fantastic. Even the fight with the likes of Esteban Ocon, I know his tyres were dying, but the way that Lewis Hamilton couldn't ever get past Ocon until basically, he was really, really struggling. Antonelli rocks up within 3 laps. He's got the move done. It just shows you the confidence he's driving with. So impressed with him. The last 3 Grand Prix have been really brilliant for him. This is great to see. This is what we wanted from Kimi Antonelli.
I was very impressed with what he was able to do. And sure, he was recovering from a situation he kind of put himself in anyway, but he still needed to get that job done. And we spoke, Sam, on the qualifying review yesterday that there are opportunities to make progress in Vegas. It's not the end of the weekend if you're knocked out in Q1. And we were speculating he could get back into the lower ends of the points, and he's exceeded that with a P5. The way in which the hard tyres, sure, they were the best tyre. We knew that from the start. It's not like anyone did this strategy last year. Like, if going into this race, we knew that 12 months ago, a car from the midfield had done a stint of 45 laps or whatever on these hard tyres, we know it's doable. Someone like Antonelli might do the same thing. I'm sure it was in the back of their minds, but they don't have this evidence to work off of. I think last year the max was like 33 laps or something along those lines. So it was bold of Mercedes to consider this. It was bold of them to attempt this, but it required Antonelli's excellent management of his tyres. First time in Vegas on those tyres around a street circuit. It's not easy, but he's done an excellent job. And like you say, with that whole discussion about the 5-second time penalty late on, it was a question of, was he going to be able to get that 5-second gap to Carlos Sainz? And then all of a sudden he turns on the motors and says, okay, I'm off now. I can actually get that 5 seconds to Leclerc as well, albeit by a 10th or 2 tenths as it was in the end. And I don't know, a couple more laps, like you say, maybe he is competing with the cars in front rather than defending against a couple behind. But good for Mercedes on a day where, constructors-wise, I know Verstappen's won, but he's the only Red Bull scoring. Ferrari's not had an easy day either. Having 2 cars in that fight could well pay dividends for the last couple of races in the season in that P2 championship battle. Oscar Piastri, should we discuss him? Harry, was this more of the same of what we've seen recently?
Yeah, I think so. It just no pace compared to his teammate, and obviously qualifying where he qualified, it wasn't a disaster, but it was certainly going to be more difficult for him already. It obviously was a bit of a messy turn 1 for him, but I just, given what Norris was able to unlock from that car today, and Piastri couldn't get past Antonelli, who was, as we've already said, doing a superb job on those hard tyres, but even so, had been on those tyres for an eternity, and Piastri couldn't get past him. I think it's just disappointing, and even I referenced obviously when Antonelli defended well from Piastri. That in itself is uncharacteristic of what we've become used to with Piastri, where he's normally just rocked up to a car and overtook them straight away. We're not used to him just being stuck behind a car for lap after lap after lap. And I don't know whether that's a confidence thing. It's something with not gelling with him in the car, but it's just unusual for that to be playing out like it is at the moment. So, I would say his head has dropped. The camera was following him as he got out of the car after the race, sort of walking away from the car. And it was just his body language was everything. I think he just looked a bit defeated. So, he's going to need a miracle to get back into this one. I think today has not helped whatsoever.
Sam, we've got something of a narrative at this point that Piastri struggles a bit more when it's these low grip tracks. Does this reinforce that?
Quite possibly. firstly, he got absolutely clattered by Liam Lawson in the first corner. The fact that they initially looked like they were investigating Piastri for this made me want to actually hurl my TV out into the street outside. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, although it was deemed a racing incident. But this definitely threw him off, right? He ended up getting behind the likes of Hadjar. He had to battle through a couple of cars in front of him to even become remotely competitive again. And then it was just never easy for him. It was never clean air. It was never getting ahead of, it's hard to call them traffic when they were there legitimately, but the likes of Sainz, the likes of Hadjar, Leclerc nipping at his heels, trying to get past him all the time. They ended up behind Antonelli. I don't think at any point he had clear, total air in front of him where he could just outright push. But nonetheless, when you are going up against a Mercedes where the car is faster, we saw this with Norris and Russell, and you've got younger tyres, the same tyres, but younger, it is frustrating that someone like Piastri, who was thriving so much throughout the season, just can't even get the move done on a rookie. It's in his rookie season. He's on tyres that are 40 laps old at this point, and he can't get the move done. It's really, if you had said this about the Piastri 10 races ago, I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have said that isn't going to happen. Because this is a real change in mentality. I think this is a change in his headspace. His shoulders have dropped. His head has gone. I do think realistically his championship done because his mindset isn't right anymore. And I do think this is costing him valuable points. On any other day, earlier in the season, if you could say Norris second, Piastri fourth, this wouldn't have been the end of the world. But at the crux of the championship, at this pinnacle point, every point counts. And he needs that cutthroat nature that he had from the likes of the earlier Grand Prix that he was picking up wings and moving, like Spain, the way he delivered that performance in Spain. Where's that Piastri gone? Someone needs to give him a shake. Someone needs to give him a talking to. Just say, remember how good you are, because it does feel like he's dropped his head. And I do think that's costing him more than his ability to drive quickly. So, yeah, painful one. Championship's likely gone for him. Tough turnaround for him.
I think in years to come, we'll look back at this season, and we don't know how it's going to end, obviously, but you could look at maybe just the Wikipedia results of this season, and you'll just go, what happened there? Because it just doesn't make sense with everything else that's come before, let's say, Zandvoort. Like, it is a tale of two halves, even if they're not completely split 50-50. I think Piastri is probably scratching his head as much as everyone else is. Sure, he didn't qualify on pole like Lando Norris did, so he had more work to do in the race than maybe he wanted to. But the fact that Norris could kind of rock up to George Russell and get past him with relative ease, and then you've got Piastri who loses that spot to Charles Leclerc as a result of trying to get by, was it Carlos Sainz at the time? That Leclerc was able to, or was it Hadjar? But yeah, look, he gave a spot to Leclerc. He got it back as a thanks to the undercut that McLaren pulled on Ferrari. So Ferrari strategists yet again winning the day. Sorry, John. My bad. It was the drivers. But yeah, I don't know. I think Piastri, as I say, he's probably just scratching his head thinking, what more can I do? Like, we're going to a track in Qatar where he does have some previous success. It was where he took his first sprint win, if I remember correctly. So he'll remember that quite fondly. But it seems at the moment, it doesn't matter where we go, what continent it is, what type of track it is. He seems to have that deficit to Norris in a more consistent way than we've seen in a very long time.
I think the positive thing for Piastri is I think he's won the sprint both times at Qatar that we've been the last 2 years. And then I think he hasn't converted it to an actual race win. That's the proper problem. So if he can kickstart his weekend well and then win the main Grand Prix, maybe there's a glimmer of hope.
Well, last year, the McLarens gave each other the sprint win, didn't they?
Yes,
so Norris would have won Qatar, but Piastri would have won Brazil.
I remember how much I hated that now.
Harry loved it. I remember that very much.
You're right, though. The form change is crazy. Between Australia and all the way through to Singapore, at that point, only off the podium twice, if you don't count, the retirement in Azerbaijan as well. So, ninth in Australia, fourth in Canada, everything else is a first or third. The way he's now been fifth, it would have been a fifth in a row, hanging up with that penalty for Antonelli. It's a crazy change in form.
Charles Leclerc tried, didn't he, Harry?
I gave it a go. Bless him. Yeah. Look, I think it was always going to be tough because he had a slightly high downforce setup on that Ferrari, which in the end, didn't really work out in qualifying either. But it was he tried. I'm not sure you can credit him with anything else other than he really tried. But I don't think that Ferrari was getting much further forward today. It seemed in the first stint he had some relatively good pace, but then got stuck towards the end behind Piastri and Antonelli, who obviously then pulled a big enough gap that his penalty didn't matter and still finished in front of Leclerc. So not quite the competitive showing I was perhaps thinking Ferrari might have this weekend, but that it could be applied to literally any race. So, well.
Yeah, they just didn't have much, did they? Bless them. There were some, I know because Leclerc had a bit of work to do to get up to where he was with some overtakes that he needed to make. And he made them pretty well early on. And you're thinking, all right, if now he's clear of this lot, maybe he's got something, maybe Ferrari have got something. And then for me, it was the moment of realization when everyone else had pit and it was just him and Verstappen, and it was 21 seconds separating the two of them. And at this point, not even half the race had unfolded. And you're like, oh, okay, that's Ferrari. That's where they are. They are a pit stop behind whoever's quick that weekend. It's a shame, but he tried it, Leclerc. The fact that he couldn't beat Antonelli with that 5-second penalty, that's another one it's got to hurt quite a bit. Sam, Leclerc.
The commentary really likes to hype them up for a moment. God, Ferrari, they said they've got race pace, and here they go. And it's like Hamilton gained, 6th place at the start because of this almighty incident in turn 1, and they overtook about 2 cars for the rest of the Grand Prix. Leclerc beat a Sauber, a Racing Bull, and Carlos Sainz. No disrespect to those guys, but you're a Ferrari. You should be fighting at the front. These are cars you should be beating. So the fact that he finishes 6th, he moves up 3 places in total. One of the cars he loses 2, starting in 16th place, and has a 5-second time penalty, and is the team they're fighting for second in the championship, not the team that's won the Constructors' Championship. It just tells you how far behind they are. But, as Mr. John Elking has said, they do have a brilliant car, and it is simply the drivers not making a difference. So, sorry, Leclerc, you've just not done enough today.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be Leclerc when it comes to power rankings tomorrow, because we've actually got a special guest, and that special guest is John Elkin, and he's already told me he's getting a 0 out of 10 for that race.
Well, John Elkin gets a 10.
And you know what? John Elkin has got 10s for every race this season.
Well, I love John Elkin.
Yeah, we really love John Elkin. Shall we review our bold predictions? Because that went well. Sam, your bold prediction that we've known for about 3 months at this point, but it was Antonelli.
3 months.
It might be exaggerated. Antonelli was going to win this race, and I think you might have known your fate after Saturday.
Yes, although I was still impressed. So whilst wrong, at least I was wrong valiantly. So thank you, Kimmy, for that.
Harry, what was your bold prediction?
I said that Ferrari were going to win.
How am I still closer than you?
They didn't.
Simple as that.
So that's not right. My bold prediction was that there would be 4 different teams inside the top 4, which if you look at the top 3, that's pretty good. And there was a point in this race when Leclerc got the overtake done on Piastri where I was like, hang on a minute, this might actually come true. And then Ferrari did Ferrari things, and that quickly became not true. Also, top 4 different teams in the top 4, it happened in qualifying.
Oh, well done. Well done, you.
Another hits the post moment.
But you got 2 more. You can do it.
No, I'll get those wrong in the stupidest ways as well. I don't know.
No, you're saving all your upgrades for Abu Dhabi, mate.
Yeah, I am like Ferrari. I have got my Abu Dhabi upgrade planned. Let's get into the midfield fight. Let's start about Carlos Sainz, Sam, shall we? Because he's led the way in that midfield. Some valuable points for the Williams team, even if we think that P5 is wrapped up in the Constructors' Championship. It's good for his points tally as well in what is a very close midfield at the moment. Great qualifying effort. As we suspected, couldn't quite hold on to some of those front runners, but has done enough to beat the rest of the midfield.
Yeah, I think there'll be a little part of it. It was a bit gutted when he came round the first corner in the pit phase and just saw the McLaren and the Ferrari drive off in front of him. I bet he thought, damn it, see you later, guys. It's a shame because I think Carlos Sainz's pace, raw pace as a driver, was brilliant this weekend. He was really on it. One of his most consistent and better weekends that we've seen since he's been at Williams. The car's just not there to deliver what it needs to do. And maybe it will be next season. If he can continue this form into the end of the season and take it into 2026, and they can give him a car that's good enough to fight amongst these top guys, in a dream world for you Williams fans, I'm sure that's what you're hoping for. He's looking very, very good. He did a great job to stay in front of the likes of Hadjar, not troubled by Hulk, by the Haas guys at all, by Hamilton. So this is as good as it was going to get without anything going massively wrong for the cars in front of him. I think he'll come away happy.
Harry, we saw that Carlos Sainz didn't necessarily have the best start to the year at Williams, new team, new environment. But is it races like this sort of performance that vindicates James Vowles' decision to bring him here? And he's got to be quite happy moving forward, right?
Yeah, I think it's not just races. I think it's weekends like he's delivered. I think the race combined with the qualifying are exactly the reasons why James Vowles, went after Carlos Sainz so hard last year. This is what we were expecting from Sainz. I think what Williams were expecting from Sainz. I think when there are opportunities, within the car to deliver these performances, Sainz has delivered, and similar to Baku, I guess in that regard. I think when the car was there, Sainz was there. So, another strong weekend. Obviously, it was always going to be difficult to stay where he'd qualified. I think it wasn't quite the same scenario as Baku in that sense. But even so, I think he did a super job in that Williams to bring him some more solid points and cement their position in the championship.
Yeah, I thought he was excellent as well. And obviously heap praise on what he did yesterday in qualifying, but here in the race, equally as impressive, to be honest. I like to go back to the first race of this season. Oh, sorry, not quite the first race of the season, but Bahrain earlier on this year, where he was in somewhat of a fight with, I can't remember if it was the Ferraris or the Mercedes, but in a car that isn't capable of what those cars are capable of. He was trying his best to fight with those front runners, and it cost him that day. He went through his tyres far too quickly, and he said at the end of that race, I remember that it was a lesson learned that he's back in the midfield, at least temporarily. Sometimes you have to work with what you're given. I think this race was kind of evidence that he has learned, because he didn't spend too much time trying to see if he could keep pace with George Russell or Lando Norris. He realised his fight was against Hadjar and Hülkenberg and the Haas drivers, and he did everything he needed to do to beat those drivers. And he did it very comfortably in the end. With the way I'm sure he didn't know the way in which Antonelli's race was going to unfold. So that was potentially another opportunity to see if he could pick off that spot. But I think it became clear late on that he and Leclerc just didn't have the pace to compete with what Antonelli had. So I think he's claimed the absolute maximum from this race. He'll be maybe slightly gutted there wasn't some random DNF in front of him, some weird Vegas low grip sort of incident that might have got him a P4 or a P5, but I'm sure he'll be pretty happy with this one. Hadjar leads the way for Racing Bulls, Sam. We know that he didn't have the best of it in qualifying versus his teammate, but with the way that first lap unfolded, it went his way.
Yeah, again, Liam, I shout your praises in qualifying, and you just barreled into turn one and cost yourself, because again, I feel like the pace was going to be close between them. But Hadjar does what Hadjar does so well. He converted a strong qualifying into a solid race result. 4 points in a Racing Bull, keeps that fight in their championship alive for him. He bests his teammate once again because Lawson's dealing with broken front wing, driving around at the back. It's really solid again. It's like Hadjar just shows that he can. How many times can we pronounce his name differently in one sentence? I wonder. It just shows that he's able to stay out of trouble, get the job done. He was fighting with cars around him to a degree, pulls away from the likes of Hülkenberg, never troubled by the likes of Hamilton. This is solid, really, really solid. Just kept his head down, did his own race.
And points also for Nico Hülkenberg, Harry. Again, he seems to have been found.
We it lost for quite some time, but we have located Nico Hulkenberg, and he's back back where he belongs in that car. Yeah, I think that was like just a classic Nico Hulkenberg race, right? If you look at what Nico Hulkenberg does, he does that. Yeah, made that strategy work really well, and had he had Hamilton behind him. It was putting away from him in that Sauber, which is, I guess, a repeat somewhat of his podium at Silverstone. But yeah, he made the strategy work well for him and picked up a couple of points. So a good day at the office for Hulkenberg, who seems to be finishing the season stronger than, I guess, the mid part of it was for him.
Yeah, there's probably some connection to where beef is sold or something random that someone on Twitter would be able to say, "Oh, look at the pattern." We don't care. Yeah, I thought he was pretty good. I'm surprised that no one in front of him because he started 11th. I was surprised no one in front of him did the same strategy where they started on the hard tires, because I think it was pretty effective. That hard tire was the better of the two. And I think if you could just manage it for as long as Hulkenberg did with the effectiveness that he did, that would then allow you to, on the, in theory, weaker tire, kind of be clear. Like, he overcut a couple of cars on those hard tires and then managed the medium tires very well. That's something he's really improved on these last few years, and the experience is counting. Is tire management. Like, he is up there as one of the best on the grid right now. And he didn't really ever look to be phased by the cars behind. As you say, like, Hamilton was more focused with Esteban Ocon behind him than he was Hulkenberg in front. So couldn't quite make inroads on Hadjar in front of him or Sainz in front of him, but a couple more solid points for the Hulk. Not as good of a day for Haas, Sam. Let's just touch on those, because they've had some very good days recently. Not like they were completely out of the fight, but maybe competitiveness here was lower than what we've seen recently.
Yeah, it's an odd one, because I actually feel like the medium onto hard was the better of the two strategies if you knew how to work it. And they just kept Ocon out again for so long. Why are they not bringing my man into the pit lane? Get him on the better tyre. We've seen so many drivers excelling on that hard tyre. You saw Kimi Antonelli stop right at the start of the Grand Prix, catch up, pass your driver, drive off down the road, finish the race. He's done. Ocon is still on lap 24, wherever it is, on medium tyres, and you're dragging him around that racetrack. Bring my man in. And I think that cost them. I really think they had a chance to maybe nick a point. They were close enough to Hamilton for quite a while. Towards the end of the Grand Prix, the gap was starting to close up again. I just think if they'd done it earlier, there's a real chance that maybe they'd have scraped 1, maybe 2 points, because the medium was ropey. And I feel like whilst Hulkenberg was able to keep Hamilton quite comfortably at bay, if there was a fast-moving hard tyre user behind, that might have been a bit of a different question. So whilst the car wasn't perfect, I do think they've cost themselves a point.
Yeah, I think Behrman did pretty well in that first stint, but was clearly struggling to hold on to the positions that he'd gained at the start when everything just opened up for him. I think with Esteban Ocon, at first I wasn't too sure on the strategy. Before saying anything else, actually, he'll look at Antonelli's race and say, "That's my strategy. You put me on that every single time when it doesn't work. And now it does work and you don't even consider it. Come on." I initially wasn't sure about the strategy either. I think they did make the right play by going a little bit longer on the mediums. I know it's counterintuitive because the hard tyre was definitely stronger, but I think the only chance he had of getting by Hamilton and then maybe Hulkenberg was with that delta. And I think if he'd stopped 5 laps earlier, he'd have been closer to them, I think, and he wouldn't have needed to make up as much ground. But I think he would have had tyres that were too similar to the cars in front to make a move. I think they were pretty much locked into where they were. I think that's maybe just where the pace was.
They set the car up to be very good in a straight line, because Charles Leclerc was like a rocket. He was on like 346 kilometers an hour, about 10 kilometers faster than anyone else. But it felt like Ocon was really tough to get past, even with his ailing tyres on that first stint. So I don't know if they were fast in the straights for a reason. It seemed to work for a while.
Yeah, a little bit of difference in the setups that we had. Any thoughts on Aston Martin, Harry? tough one.
Sure. I just saw on Twitter, by the way, that Alonso after the race was like, "Oh, how did Lance do?" And they're like, "He retired on that one, mate."
Not even his own fault, that one.
He retired
can't
90 minutes ago.
Oh yeah, how did that guy do?
Well, that speaks volumes because they're never near each other on the track. So Alonso's probably like, "Oh, he must be in it somewhere." Just further back. Yeah, a tough race, but after what? Yeah, it was looking quite promising in wet quali. I think obviously their car suits conditions where downforce is key. So yeah, a tough day. Obviously, Alonso also got damage on lap 1 as well. So yeah, I think from there he struggled. They went for the earlier stop as well for him, but it didn't. There wasn't much they could do, but it didn't work out. So a tough day, especially when you look at it and Alonso's gone from, was it 7th to 13th or something like that. It's quite a drop down the order. So I didn't think this weekend was going to be particularly good for them, but I had maybe qualifying sort of over exaggerated where they were going to finish. Maybe 13th is about where that car was anyway.
Yeah, I think so. Based on the high-speed nature of this track, I don't think any of us were particularly optimistic about their chances. It was after the pit stop where I was like, oh, okay. Because they got the undercut done on Behrman, so good work from Aston Martin in that regard. And then they were just slow. And okay. And Behrman comes past, and then Ocon comes past. Like, okay, this isn't going anywhere for Aston Martin today. But might be stronger when we get to the last 2 races. Sam, before we go on to driver of the day, just with that lap 1, obviously we've talked about it from the front of the grid's perspective, and we've kind of touched on it from Liam Lawson's perspective as well. Has Bortoleto stopped braking yet?
My man is just gone, Lance Stroll is a brake.
Yeah.
He is my pedal now, and I will use him as appropriate. And he used him as appropriate because, good Lord, Bortoleto, do you want to actually try and make the corner? Did he bother to brake? He also ended up collecting about 8 members of the field with that incident. Poor Pierre. It was going so well. The sausage lives on, but it was a struggle. Alpine unfortunately got hit with that as well. Lance Stroll wiped out. Is fully on Gabby. I don't know what went wrong there, but he just overshot this corner, but overshot it by like 200 meters. It felt like he was never making it.
Nothing went wrong. He just was getting revenge for Brazil.
All right. Well, tit for tat.
Yeah. I want to see a photo of them just like shaking hands, like, fair, all right.
You got me. I got you. We're all
friends. Shall we give out our driver of the day?
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
Well, Sam, for the second race in a row, Max Verstappen claimed the people's vote. Not quite as convincingly as he did in Brazil. Is he getting your vote as well?
He's right up there. Fantastic performance. I do think that the fuel issue has made that win look a little bit more lovely than it probably was at the actual point where the fuel kicked in. But no, I'm going Kimi Antonelli. I don't think the penalty was deserved. I understand why he was so far back. I don't think it was 100% on him for being out in Q1. Rookie performance in qualifying, it happens, but the comeback was sensational. Great management, brilliant defense. And the 5-second penalty, I think, is a little bit farcical. So for me, driver of the day.
Harry?
Antonelli's solid shout. I've gone for Verstappen. I think it was quintessential Verstappen win this one. He looked so untroubled from turn 1 onwards. But I think Antonelli is a fair shout as well.
I've gone with Verstappen, and I take your point, Sam, that I think the win margin looks more inflated than what it deserves, and maybe it should have been around that 6-second margin, if not for those fuel issues late on for Lando Norris. But even so, he had this in hand and probably could have won this race by a little bit bigger of a margin if he needed to. Doesn't matter in the end. Very dominant display. So yeah, he's my driver of the day. Worst driver of the day.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
What have you got, Harry?
Bortoleto. I mean, this might become an easy one, but he again still not started to break for turn 1. We're waiting for it.
I'll keep it short. Mine's Bortoleto. Maybe because I know he's a big fan of the podcast and he is actually a Patreon subscriber. Is Bortoleto lives in Patreon City.
Hi, Gabby.
Maybe just take a week off from power rankings. That doesn't give an excuse for the rest of you. I expect the rest of you will all be there, but Bortoleto, maybe just take a week. Sam?
Yeah, Bortoleto, but just to give credit where credit's due, there are a few stinkers dropped today. Yuki Tsunoda doesn't beat Fernando Alonso, who I think had damage at one point as well. Only beats Pierre Gasly by 5 seconds as well. Also thought Albon was pretty smelly. Didn't have a good day either. So Bortoleto, you get it, but there's a couple of lucky little munchkins out there who get away with it.
Some lucky munchkins. Wow.
Sounds like a good cereal, that.
It does sound like it should be a cereal. Big brain Strat.
Bob, we're gonna need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
Sam, what have you got?
Tricky one, this, because they all kind of follow one or two of the obvious strats. So I just think getting Kimi Antonelli off those soft tires early, put him on the hards, playing out perfectly. Nothing silly, just really solid, and he made it work.
Harry?
This one relates to that strategy, but again, I've seen this on social media afterwards. It's Hamilton and his race engineer, who love each other, discussing after that. Hamilton's like, why did the Mercedes, Antonelli, end up in front of us? And he's like, well, they pit really early and just went along. And he's like, right, okay. I'm just like, Ferrari in general, not thinking outside the box at all. Sorry, I'm talking too much. Yeah,
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yes, thank you for correcting yourself there. That's appreciated. My big brain strat has to be, and it's a continuation from qualifying, actually, because we spoke about how Lance Stroll was the only driver to go onto intermediate tires in Q2, which kind of backfired. But we didn't know how much it was going to backfire because that put him in the warpath of Gabriel Bortoleto. And hey, if they strategize that better and he starts 2 positions ahead of where he does, he might have a great race. I know it's a qualifying one that's bled over into the race, but just that's what you get, Aston Martin. That's what you get for that silly call. You get taken out by Bortoleto. Our moment of the race. And let's start with Harry.
Mentions we've already said. The message to Norris saying that he's going to go and get Verstappen, and then Verstappen probably just sodding it off. I really enjoyed that one. I have gone for, though, which is quite Sky specific, so apologies for those who don't have that coverage. But Bernie Collins, professional former F1 strategist, having to try to explain to Crofty why having new softs would be better than old hards.
Oh, it is difficult sometimes, isn't it?
She has got the patience of a saint.
What a wonderful woman she is.
Yes.
Lovely, lovely woman. And she, it's like, do you know when you know when someone's being stupid? She was like explaining it again, but louder and slower. It was so she was there. She's like, "You softs, you stupid man."
We stand Bernie in this podcast.
We do stand Bernie on this podcast. Your moment of the race, Sam?
69 wings.
I knew that. That's good. I knew
Yeah,
that was
I mean,
point.
Nice.
That was an easy one.
It's great. You know what? It's great to throw back to the old number. Okay, give it the respect it deserves. None of this new rubbish with the number 2 before it. None of that. Back to the OG. That's what we'd like to hear.
Nostalgia.
Nothing hits harder than nostalgia.
Yeah. My moment of the race, I can't believe we're going to have 2 moments of the race that weren't in the race, because I'm also going with something that happened afterwards. outside of the absolute cringe fest that was that post race, I just
don't like Mickey Mouse conducting a fountain.
You know what? That wasn't even the bit that hurt me the most. Like, it was maybe not for me, but I could let that slide. It was the interview. I don't remember the chap's name. It's whenever it's like,
Sam.
I've got a celebrity here to help me with the interviews. There's something that just makes my skin crawl about it. But that's actually not my moment of the race. My moment of the race was the incredibly British moment of when that drive was over from old Terry Crews. George Russell getting out the car. Thanks, Terry. And then I got you, man.
I got you, baby.
I got you, baby.
Moments away from saying what time you on till.
Yeah, it's like he had to. Like, it was in his British DNA that he had to thank the drive. Like,
Cheers, drive.
Cheers, Terry.